We begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Gitin Daf Yud Aleph. We begin 12 lines down by the top of the Yomid. But the Gemara continues explaining this halacha of Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah. We had this machlekes in the Mishnah. The Tanna Kama said that all documents that are produced in a secular court, even though their signatures are also, they were signed by not Jews, going to be kosher, except for Gitin Daf Rabbi Shimon said no, even Gitin Daf Rabbi are going to be kosher. So the Gemara continues explaining that opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Today's Daf. Some of this discussed in today's Daf are Kershal Akim, as we discussed, part of reviewing what we said about the secular courts. Shemas Mavhakim, distinctly not Jewish names. What does the Mishnah mean when it was done by a common man, which we already mentioned this, that idea that is two different interpretations of the Gemara. Is that actually qualifying Rabbi Shimon's words, or is that actually qualifying the Reish of the Rabbanan's words? That Reb Shimon was saying, as the Brisa elaborates, that they're going to be kosher when Jews don't sign. Again, so you won't run into the problem. We'll know that it's not Jewish. The difference between shliach le'lacha, shliach le'kabbalah, an agent that's delivering, an agent that's receiving, which relates to the halacha that we're discussing on the days of Zachan la'ad mishlei b'fanav, ein chavan lo'ilad el b'fanav. You could merit for someone even when he's not there, but you cannot create a liability for a person when he's not there, meaning with his presence of mind. That if someone says, give this get to my wife, if he wants to back out, he can back out until she gets it. However, there's a machlokes regarding he said, give this document of emancipation to my slave. Is that considered a schus, or is that considered a chayv, regarding your ability to back out? And one final halacha, which comes up other mesechtes too, interesting sugya about types about chayv. If someone grabs something for a creditor in a place where it's going to be a liability for others, you have that halachic right, and are there any differentiations in that halacha? So we begin the current Daf Yud Aleph, 12 lines down, where the Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in the Brisa that Amr Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yisi, he says, Kach Amr Reb Shimon lachacham b'tzidon. This is what Reb Shimon said to the Chachamim in Tzidon, where he was bringing support for his opinion. That he was saying that even Gitin are going to be kosher in our kayas in the secular courts with the secular witnesses. Because he said, to support what he was saying, we didn't have this machlekes Rabbi Kiva and the Chachamim, which was the generation before them. So he's quoting the previous dar. They didn't disagree. All documents that are produced in the secular court, even though they're signed by not Jewish witnesses, which is what Reb Shimon is trying to support himself. So this is what Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yisi was quoting, this Brisa that Reb Shimon said this to the Chacham, like he says now Mishnah, that even Gitin Daf is kosher. They didn't disagree, which this is actually dependent. We had two interpretations a few lines before from the previous Daf, that what do the words mean to say when you end off the Mishnah, this is going like the interpretation that the Sefer of the Mishnah is going Reb Shimon's own words. So on that, Reb Shimon says that this machlekes was so when did they disagree? Only when it's done by a stamagoy, not in the courts. Rabbi Kiva says it's going to be valid. Chacham say it's going to be invalid. Except for Gitin Daf, meaning since it was done by a regular person, so by a shtar mecher, which the whole point is for proof, so you're relying on the not Jewish witnesses, that's going to be puzzle according to the Chachamim, because maybe they're signing falsely. But Gitin Nashim, we're not relying on them. There's Eidei Mesira, as we explained on the previous Daf, and we're talking about, as we said, the opening words of this Amid, B'Shem es Mevakim. It's clearly not Jewish names, so you're not going to run into the problem about Mezuyif Mitaychai. Even if you hold like Rabbi Elazar, we explained Rabbi Shimon that he holds like Rabbi Elazar. We wanted to know, besides, how's it kosher? They're not b'nei creases. He says, no, don't worry about the Eidei Chassid. That's Kenzan Goyin. Eidei Mesira Yid. He said, it's Mezuyif Mitaychai. No, it's not Mezuyif Mitaychai because it's Shemes Mevakim. Clearly not Jewish names that we said. Now, so that says Rabbi Shimon, no one disagrees with Gitin Nashim that's going to be kosher. If you want to say machlekes, It's going to be when it's nishkevein and arkais, not in the court. Stam goyim. Stam goyim. Okay, for Gitin, we don't care if it's courts or not courts, because it's Eid Basir that's doing it anyway. The difference would be regarding shtar mecher, let's say, where it's for the evidence. Do we rely on them? Well, the judges, they wouldn't just, verify, if it wasn't true. It wouldn't be oroi nafshayu, but a stam goy would. He wouldn't care. So therefore, that's a difference. In that case, Rabbi Kiva would still say it's kosher, but the Chum would say it's possible. But again, Gitin Daf, according to everyone, says Rabbi Shimon would work in all cases. Now, Shimon Lilam, he says, Af Elu. He says, actually, even Gitei Nashim are kasherin. So, up until this point was Reb Shimon, who we quoted him in the Mishnah. And Shimon Lilam says that actually, even Gitei Nashim are kasherin, b'makom she'en Yisrael chaisman, where if Jews don't sign, in other words, what's he coming to add on to Reb Shimon? So Rashi explains, even these Gitei Nashim that you validate, Shimon is qualifying. He says, when are they kosher? Only in a place where Jews don't sign, meaning a city where the non-Jews don't allow Jews to sign. Now, since Jews don't sign in that city, everyone knows that who's signing must be a guy. And we're not going to rely on them. And we're giving it over in front of Yiddish Eidim. So that's not a problem about Mezoif Metoich. Again, remember, the whole problem with Mezoif Metoich is the problem you might come to use them at a different time. But a place where Jews sign, even though these names are distinctly not Jewish names, you would not be able to validate such a get. It would be puzzle. Why? Because if you would validate these, you might come to validate it when it's not distinctly not Jewish names. So that's what Shimon is. So he's being machmer a little bit. He's qualifying this only where Jews are not allowed to sign. So that says the Gemara, wait a second. Even the place where Jews don't sign, you should also make a gzera because of a place where Jews do sign, like Rashi explains. Just like you a geyser that you're not allowed to use even distinctly not Jewish names, meaning you, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. You disagree with Rabbi Shimon on that. You say even if it's distinctly not Jewish names, because you might come to validate when it's not distinctly non-Jewish names. So then, how does it help to do it in a place where they don't let Jews sign? You should be geyser at the place that Jews do sign. No. They're independent gezeres, meaning one is a gezerah of muvhakim atu ein muvhakim, and then independent of that, even if it's muvhakim, you're saying if it's in a place where they don't sign, we say, but you want to say no, yeah, muvhakim. Even muvhakim, we say that is a problem because of ein muvhakim. So why are you letting in a place where it's, let's say, muvhakim, that because they don't sign, but you might come to do it even in places that they do sign. So on that says the is it considered Lizer? Is that because is that even well, I'm saying the only problem is really it's not really be'etzem possible because you really have Eid and Mesira. So you're saying on the place where they don't sign, that Jews don't sign is kosher, and why don't you have a concern for the place where they do sign, which that itself is only a concern, but might come to use it, which, yeah, it's a good question. Al Kapanim says the Gemara, no, Shema B'Shema Michlef. To mixing up names, that we might mix up. So, Mavhakim, but the Ein Mavhakim is a real concern. Because who knows what's clearly a non-Jewish name versus when it's that gray, that maybe it's a Jew, not a non-Jew. But Asher Ba'Asher LaMichlef. But places we don't mix up. We know there's a place that no Jews allowed to sign, big fat signs. What I'm saying, no Jews allowed. We know those places, and therefore it's not going to get confused. So that's the reason for the discrepancy in Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's opinion. Now, related discussion of arkais that we validate only, let's say, shtar mecher, only specifically in the court and not by a hedid. So Ravina thought to validate other documents by the gathering of the Arameans, meaning that it wasn't a court, but it was like this, in the marketplace when people come together and they they have a certain system. So Rafim, he says, no, our Koisnan. We only a guy with a big robe, with it's a judge. He worked his way up, and first on this and then that, and then he finally is a judge. That's we validate. That guy would not be a roy nafshaya. He wouldn't. But a stammer guy, even if it's some type of a system, we don't validate other documents. Now, more of Omar Rava, he says, Hai Shtada Parsa. He says this Persian document, meaning that was made in the Persian language, and regular Persian non-Jews signed in it. The Masrina Ale Bapis Hadi Yisrael, that was given over in front of Jewish witnesses. You could collect from it from available properties from the debtor. It's going to work. So the Gemara says you're going to have a series of interesting questions on this halacha. But the witnesses who it was given over in front of them, they don't know how to lamikri. They don't know how to read it. They don't know what it is. So this is like a cat from the Raya. Someone wanted to say was learn in the someone was saying from Lashon Sursi, whatever. See, my weiß nicht the goyish l'shaynis. My weiß no Yiddish, and a lot of Aramaic. They don't know what it is. How could they testify at a later point in time what they saw given over in front of them, but is Persian? No. Amul Tzitef Tzachayid Weiss the Lushan Laz was Merat in the Medina. He knows the language. Says okay, but I have another question. But you need it to be Ksav She'en Yochel Zayiv. The parchment has to be prepared with what's called afatzim, with the gall nuts. When you're working through the piece of paper, which they make it black, which then a person can't erase it anymore and then subsequently write on it again because it's recognizable. And you don't have to because the Persian parchment is not worked out with afatzim. So a person could erase what was written and he could put the witness's signature and write something on the top like millions of dollars. So how does that work? So where it did have this afitzin, which says as a discussion, we don't have afitzin, but we have other things that work like that. But you need to have another halacha. Tzorch sheyachzid is halacha by shtar. The tzorch sheyachzid minyan shel shtar b'shita achreina. It has to review the entire document in one last line, as the Gemara says about Basra Chav Samach Aleph from the base, that it has to say b'kaninim and plaini akoma the custom before shleil. Meaning, it has to say and it has to summarize in one sentence what was written in the whole thing. But like you don't have them in the Persian document. It says but the Mahada. It is tomorrow where everything was reviewed in the last line. So the Gemara says, so why are you not collecting even from collateral from sold properties? Says no, less they color. The word doesn't get out because it wasn't signed by Jews. It's the witnesses who signed in the document. They're the ones that he comes home and he tells his wife, "Oh, you should know this document that I just signed today." He tells his friend, he goes to shul, and he tells. So therefore, the buyer's not losing out because we tell him that. No, it's signed by Persians. The Edom Assyria were Jews. So although it's kosher, but it's not going to be kosher to collect from the Shabbatim, because only when the Jews are signed on it, says the Gemara later on, Daf Yomi Beis, they're the ones who spread the word. So the Lekuchas find out. So you knew that this was. So you went into that. But if not, it's not fair for market purposes, for consumer protections, that you could collect from the guys available because it is a kosher star, but you cannot collect from the Shabbatim. No, so the Gemara is asking on the Edom Assyria, right? Yeah, the Gemara is asking on the Edom Assyria that they saw it. What does it help? The Edom Assyria, they're supposed to see and recognize what was being done over here. So even if we say like Rabbi Lazar, we paskin like that is by shar stars, but now the Gemara has a related question. No, monetary document. Yeah, by shar stars also. Yeah, maybe this is one of those rayas that they say that we pass like Rabbi Lazar also by shar stars. So the Gemara says, Shlakish from Yechina. Shlakish asks from Yechina as a Gitin Daf Beis. What happens if you have Edom Achasumin ala get? Let's say if witnesses sign on the get, and it's coming from Eretz Yisrael, says Rashi, because it doesn't say Medina Sayam. Ushmoisin kishmois oivdi kachav. Now the names on the get have non-Jewish names. Now we don't know if they're not Jewish or Jewish. Mao, what's the halacha? Would you validate it with Ede Mesira. As Taish explains, what's the question? Do we say that they're Jewish and it's kosher according to Reb Meir, or let's say with the Ede Mesira according to Belazar, because we wouldn't suspend that they're not Jewish. We have a lot of people that Maris or whatever the name is, unless you knew for sure that they're not Jewish, because it's not common that a non-Jew should be signing on the get. Or maybe that since the names are like not Jewish names, we are concerned maybe a non-Jew, and there it's not kosher. Even with Ede Mesira according to Belazar, because it's Mezuf Miteiche. And even according to Rabbi Shimon, because he only validates when they're distinctly not Jewish names. Here, it's not Muvakim. Not sure. It could be a not Jew, it could be a Jew. By Shemis Muvakim, you're right, there's no doubt, because obviously it would be non-Jew. Because in every place, we're not concerned that we're going to come to rely on them. But that's the question. If you have a get that comes from in Eretz Yisrael with a name, well, maybe Bob would be clearly not Jewish, but Max, whatever it is, all these Jewish people that have these not Jewish names, what would the halacha be? So Amalei says, we didn't have a situation that had a get that had the name, like a not Jewish name signed in it. Ella, only one case, which it was signed Locus Velos. Lucas. And Lus. Right. And we validated with Ede Mesira. Now, says the Gemara, but Dafka Lucas and Belus, Lewis, who knows, Lewis, that those are distinctly non-Jewish names. And we're not going to come to rely on them, like Reb Shimon. It's not common for Jews to name themselves like that. But other names, the Shchichi Yisod Damaski B'Shmasaya, that Jews use those type of non-Jewish names. That you come to the meeting expecting some slick Italian not Jew. You come, Haimish Yid. I was emailing back and forth. I thought, who knows that's going to be? So then no, that's because Yid knows to use that name, and therefore we wouldn't validate in that type of situation. If it's a clearly non-Jewish name, according to Rabbi Shimon, it's good, better that way, because it's not Mazuif Metoich. We're not going to come to rely on it.
But you're allowed to rely on it because it's fine.
No, we don't know. It's coming from Eretz Yisrael, and we don't know who usually when you have Edim Chasumim, so it's good. Until there's Ir or whatever, you say it's good, because you have two witnesses sign. But we don't know. It could be Goyim. If it's a Yiddish name, a Yid to do Chasman. But we have this guy signing, we don't know who this is. He uses his secular name, and it's Agoya Azad Yid. We don't know. So then it's actually worse, at least if we're going in Reb Shimon at least.
If it's coming in as a shul, then you can be behind the mishna.
But I don't know, this Goyim. The Gemara is going to actually touch on this point right now, but do Goyim in Eretz Yisrael, you don't know, it could be a Goy. Right? There's Lucas, this yeah, exactly. So we might not validate it. To which Esvei, on that Rish Lakish, he asks to Rabbi Yechanan, he says, wait a second, I'll ask you from the following Bryce. The Bryce says, Gitin Daf when you have a get that comes from overseas, and you have witnesses on it. Says the Bryce, even though the names are like not Jewish names, Sharon, they're going to be valid, even without Ede Mesira. For sure, if there's Ede Mesira, because we don't presume them to be but Jews. And the reason they should be social is because most of the Yidden in Chutzlart, their names are like not Jewish names. So why are you saying only Lucas and Lewis is Dafka going to be kosher? Which Atais explains, the Gemara assumes that the Bryce is saying most of the Jews in Chutzlart, their names are like not Jewish names, is not only coming to validate when it's coming from overseas. He's just explaining the reasoning that it's normal for Jews to have not Jewish names. Because Chutzlarts, most of their names are not Jewish. So even in Eretz Yisrael, we don't have to be concerned. Maybe a goy, like a chasmet of a get. It's not normal to have a goy chasmet get. Is a goy shenumen. Es trefft sich. Jeden machen goy shenumen. So, therefore, why are you saying it's only kosher when the shem is mavhakma, a klor, or a goy shenumen? No, even not. We're telling this is given a yid. Says the Gemara, no. And this is what the Gemara is retracting. No, from its premise. Hasam get the time. That Bryce, don't ask on me. That's because it says because most of the Yidden in Chutzlart, from Medina Sayyam, Shmeisein Kishim Rabbi Kachavim. Their names are like not Jewish names. When did Rabbi Yechanan say that Dafka, if it's only Shemis Mavhakim, it's going to be kosher, and clearly not Jewish names, then it's Yisrael, because most of their names are not Goyish names. So if we're not sure, maybe it's Agoy and would be possible. Even with Eid Mesira, because as we explained according to Rabbi Shimon, it would be Mezur Menteicha. This is you bring me Goyish name and is kosher, that's going to be different because it's only in Eretz in Chutzlar that's going to validate, but not in Eretz Yisrael. Or we could have another approach. Some say that actually it was a very different conversation. It wasn't the way we described it. The question that Rish Lakish asked from Yechanan was actually the exact case of the Brisa. Get coming from a Dinas Hayam, not an Israel. And the names are like non-Jewish names. What's the halacha? Rabbi Yechanan resolved it clearly. Mimasnina from the Brisa, it says it's going to be valid because we presume they're Jewish, because most of the Jews in Chutzlar, their names are like non-Jewish names. And that was the question and answer that he had. Now continue halacha the next Mishnah. Continuing with.
Why can't we just verify with the Eden that even the Shliach that's bringing the get had to be there the that time, so he can confirm whether they were Jewish or not Jewish. Confirm who the Eden were that were the Eden Chasima, and we can validate it that way.
True. Maybe it's one of those cases that in the Yochaloimer he couldn't say or he didn't say. But it's a good question. If the guy himself says b'fanei nechtam, well, the truth is, well, not really asking him that. If it's lashma, kimishtaris, yeah, good question. Rabbi Loza, which he's like Rabbi Loza.
Then the husband comes and
Well, that's why we sign on it. That's why. That's right. So exactly. So according to Rabbi Loza, the reason why we sign is that if the husband's going to come and contest, the Eid Masir are in Bermuda or they're somewhere on vacation, we don't know, they're not going to have to validate it. Maybe they died. So that's why we chas them according to Rabbi Loza. In case that happens, we have something concrete that we could show 50 years from now that people could recognize their signatures. That's why we sign according to Rabbi Loza. Even though biblically you don't need Eid Chasima, we sign for that reason itself because of the husband might be ma'ar, and then we'll have verification, even though you don't really need it. Now, no, they have to be there when it's given over. And they. Oh, he's asking the shliach. He's asking b'fanei nechtam.
How can he say b'fanei nechtam not be there?
Well, we said that he could say b'fanei nechtam, right? B'fanei nechtam. He has to see the sig. That's the whole point. It's kim shtaris. Then, unless he doesn't know their pedigree. Maybe he saw people signing, and he doesn't know if they're Jewish or not Jewish. What? Right? Maybe it's two shlichim. You're saying? No, but he's asking. He's saying if it comes from Medina Sayyam. What are you declaring to say if it's Kusha, Nish, Gitin, or the Goyim, we don't know the name? No, not the Goyim, but the Shlich, how's it coming from Medina Zayyam? The Shlich is bringing it. The opening of Mishnah of our Mesechta, Ameivi get Medina Zayyam, so ich loim b'fonei nechtam. The same Mezuk b'fonei nechtam. So what's clear stuff is the Gitin, the Goyim that's. No.
But here we're talking about Eid Masira. We don't need Eid Masira if you have a Shliach. The Shliach is the Eid Masira.
we need Eid Masira for the pieces.
No, you need a Masira when you give it over.
We need Eid Masira just to make the pieces.
Right, exactly.
So if you give it over to Shliach didn't see
if you say Masira.
Right, at the time of the giving over the get to the woman, there's a bezdin and there's Eid Masira, and they're seeing it being given over to the woman.
In addition to the Shliach.
Unless maybe not. Unless maybe the shliach says this to the court, and then the court actually gives it to her.
the Shliach doesn't know that.
Leave it as a may. We have the shliach that's saying. No, he means the Eidim. Right, that's what I was clearing, and maybe they don't know the pedigree.
He's not going to make the declaration if it's not kosher. That's the whole point. He's not going to say b'fanei nechtam.
Yeah, so he knows lishma because unless if it's a guy, then they don't have income. No, in
A
Hanami. But that's declared. Does he maybe not know also? Yeah.
Goy can do the shema.
No, they won't. That's what Tais actually says. No, but he doesn't know if it's a guy, doesn't he? He doesn't know.
It shows up necessarily said that's what I am signing. That's
That means that you.
No, but he doesn't know if that's the case. Mezukt lishma. Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg in Zin huben mit Mechasmen for the man and the Frau. And these guys are signing. We don't know. Is it the Gitin or the guy? He doesn't know. Kasketl. Either way. So now we get to the halacha of the next Mishnah. Again, now continuing with the halacha of Gitin Daf regarding the halacha of a shliach, which is really the theme of this parak of a mevi. However, if someone says 10 get zel ishti, which already quoted this on Daf Test, this Mishnah, someone says, give it this get to my wife. Or shtar shiur zel avdi, give the shtar shiur to my slave. If he wants to back out with, but because we already mentioned this idea that the shabu, that the commonalities between Gitin Daf with this was possibly one of them. That if he wants to back out by any one of these two before it gets to the hand of the woman or the slave, Meir says he could back out, and the shlich cannot be zoichin it for them because it's actually a liability for them, as we can explain further, and therefore the Baal could back out. Chamim, they disagree. They say it depends. Begite nashim, by a divorce of a woman, then he can back out. But not by emancipation of a slave, he cannot back out. Because in Taisus proves that Rashi that we had difficult at, and that this is where Rashi actually retracts. It doesn't hold to that middle gang. People were very busy. Taisus was asking on that Rashi that because you could be zeich of a person when they're not there, and the shleich was zeich for the eved, but the liability, like for the woman, that can only be in front of them. And he explains why it's a chayv for the eved. Because Shem Yirtza Shleilosnes Abdoi Rishai. If he wants to not feed a slave, he's permitted to. So therefore, meaning that's why it's a schus for the Evid. So therefore, when he frees him, he's not losing any food. Because anyway, if he wanted to, he didn't have to feed him anyway. So B'Shechura Avadim, it's a schus to free him. What are you going to say? What do you mean? The Evid gets food and board or whatever. if the Adam wants, he doesn't have to give him anything. But not to feed his wife, he's not permitted. So then when he's divorcing her, nice that she's losing room and board. So that's why you could back out by the woman, but you cannot back out by the slave because that's already a schos. Now, it brings interesting from the Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi says, Haga atzmacha, grab a hold of yourself. He says, if this Eved was a slave of a billionaire, isn't that a chayva for the Eved to go free? Let's say the woman was a wife of a mukashchin. Guys, a Gitin Daf, whatever. Isn't it a schus for her? So how are you making this, black and white lines that for the Eved it's a chayv, it's a schus, and for the woman it's a chayv? Says the Yerushalmi, you really have to go based on the principle of selling, or let's say you could sell the Eved shalem edaita. You don't think he's sold, and someone wants to divorce his wife shalem edaita. You think she is divorced? In other words, Tais explains the point how Yerushalmi is differentiating is that through someone else, the slave could be sold against his will. A woman cannot be divorced through someone else against her will. And therefore, that's how the Yerushalmi is magdir it and says that for the woman, it's considered as a chayv, and for the ebed, it's considered as a schus. But be that as it may, Amalahem, we may respond back to the chachamim. It's not true what you're saying, that it's a schus for the ebed, because when he gives him this get, he invalidates the eved min hadshuma. So let's say if the Adin is a Kayin, that he's not, the Eved's not going to be able to eat Truma anymore, just like he invalidates his wife. So it's a Chayiv, meaning even if the Adin doesn't feed him, but at least the Eved could go get his own Truma, now you're not going to eat Truma anymore. You're not an Eved Kayin anymore. So it is a Chayiv. So if he disagrees and he says that no, therefore he could back out even by the Eved, because it is a Chayiv. Which Amalai, the sages responded back to Ameya, no, that's an issue Kinyanai. That's only because it's Kinyan. In other words, this that Gad is going to pass him from Truma is because up until this point he's a Kinyan the Kain. But when he frees him, he's not his Kinyan. So the Gemara doesn't explain exactly what does that mean, but essentially, I can make you not my Kinyan. So I'm not causing you a Chayiv by giving the Get Shecher. So the Gemara explains, related to Allah of our Mishnah, Yosef Rav Huna, Rav Yitzchak, by Yosef Kamed Rabbi Yirmiyah. They were sitting in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Now, Taisa actually explains, we're not going to go through the whole thing, but he explains that this is not the Rav Huna that's mentioned throughout entire Shas, because he was much greater than Rabbi Yirmiyah, and he wouldn't be sitting in front of him. And brings a few different rayas that he calls him Dardiki, whatever. Al Kapanim, it's not the regular Rav Huna. They were sitting in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah. The Yosef Rabbi Yirmiyah came in Now Rabbi Yirmiyah was sitting, and he was dozing off. The Yosef Rav Huna was sitting, he was saying, Shema Menam de Rabbanon, we can infer from the teaching of the Rabban that they say that the Shliach could grab the document for the purposes of the slave. And even though the master wants to back out, and he's not his shliach anymore, it's too late, and the shliach could grab it against his will for the eved, like we say, he's not going to let the master back out. You could infer the following halacha. Ha'toif is if a regular person from the street grabs somebody's pocketbook, l'bal chayv for the creditor, because someone is owed money from that person who's a creditor, kana, that person has acquired it for that person. Which Taisus qualifies as, really? Tevis l'bal chayv? This is not really Tevis l'bal chayv, because the Ev is not a bal chayv. So the Ri says, the Ev is considered a little bit of a bal chayv, because Lamaisa, why is he freeing him? Must have been because he did something very, very satisfying for the master. But still, so then why is it considered chav la'acherim, as we're going to say in a moment? Because the master doesn't owe him anything. So that's why it's an interesting hagdara that Rav Huna was trying to say. He says, if you're grabbing for a bal chayv, which is what the shliach essentially is doing for the eved, he's going to be kaina. To which Amalei Rabbi Yitzchak by Yosef, he said to him that maybe you should infer from this even one step further. Even where this guy who's grabbing is going to create a liability la'acherim for others, let's say for a Levi, I mean, there's Reuven Shimon, because let's say you have another creditor of Reuven, and he's grabbing this person for Shimon. Levi, who is another creditor, is losing out because now there's no more money. Are you going to say that also Shimon is going to be kaina? Because the Mishnah, says Rashi, this shliach who's tefes of the Eved is creating a chav for acherim. Who's the acherim? For the Baal. He's losing out. So therefore, maybe infer that a tefes b'chayiv could be kaina even when it's chav l'acherim. So Malay says, yes, you're right. Obviously, you could be tefes b'chayiv even makom chav l'acherim. But in the meantime, Rabbi Yirmiyah woke up. He was dozing off, and Amalu he said to him, "Dardiki, kindelach." Rabbi Yochanan says, if someone grabs something for a creditor where it's going to be a liability for others, loikana, that person has not acquired. Even Mishnah, you can say, what do you say with the halacha of Mishnah? In Mishnah says that the shlich could be kind of for the eved, even though the other wants to back out, even though it's a chav for the acherim, meaning for the owner. No, our Mishnah is different. Why? Because kol oimer tenu, whoever says give is kol oimer zachu dami. It's like as if he's saying merit it for him. So that's not like a regular tefes b'chayiv. It's the Baal made him a shlich to be zeich in it. So even though Ebed doesn't know, but zachalam shal b'fanav. Therefore, that's why it's different. But stam techap, no, that's not going to work with makom shechab lachem. However, Amar Chizdi says the truth is, someone grabs something for a creditor, which is going to be a liability for others. We come to the machlekes Rabban, which is it now? We learn the Mishnah Masechet is Peya that says someone, meaning let's say a wealthy landowner, shalikat is a Peya. There's a halacha that you have to leave over the corner of the field for the poor people. Let's say he gathers the corner of the field and he says he's not taking for himself because that's us, that's Peya. He says Harizal will play the ani. Says that Chaim Yankel, that ani. This is for him, which, as Rashi points out, that's obviously chav la'acherim, because now all the other aniyim are losing out. So he says, yes, that ani merits what this balabais is putting away for him. The sages say, no, you give it to the first ani that comes. You have no rights to grab this for that ani. This is the machlekes. You're being teifis for a creditor for ani, and you see it's a machlekes tanaim. So the Gemara rejects it both ways and says, no, not true. Amema says, I could tell you either way is not the case. As Gitin Daf would be Bezim and Alf. Dimaloi, maybe it's not the case. Ad kam lekamar Rabbi Elazar Hasan. Where do we find Rabbi Elazar saying that you could be zoicha for that ani? You know why you could be zoicha of him? Is because ela de migui. You have a migui. What does that mean? Since the ibayim mafkalahula nechse, if the balabayis, if the wealthy landowner wanted to, so that's called sins. Sins if he wanted to say, you know what, it's all hefker. I have no assets whatsoever. That would make him a pauper. Then he would have himself rights to take the pay for himself. So this is what's called nigid zachla nafshi. Since he would then have the rights to take it for himself, then you have rights to take it for someone else. But over here, meaning in the regular tevis machayiv, where you have no rights to this guy's pocketbook, then lie. Then of course you wouldn't be able to be tevis. And I can say the other way too. Where do you find the Rabban that say that you cannot be tevis machayiv, meaning that you cannot be take it for the ani, meaning you have to leave for the first ani. That's because a special example is a Yikra that says loy salakid la ani, which as Rashi explains, it says in the Torah loy salakid, comma la ani v'lager tazav oisam. But the Gemara darshans at smuchim, you could read it loy salakid la ani, which means say loy salakid loy la ani, that you should not be picking it for a specific ani. So it's example as a but over here in general, no. Who said you can't? Maybe you could. So wouldn't be a raya either way. But the Gemara has one final point, Rabbi Elazar, that says you could be zeicha for a specific ani. What does he do with this loy salakid la'ani like we're reading it? You could pick it for an ani. He actually reads it. He interprets it differently. He says he needs a lahazal la'ani al shaloi. It's to warn an ani on his own. Meaning, if you have a pauper that's so poor, he's in the category of taking payah, but he has his own small little field. The Torah is saying that he himself has to leave payah. So loy salakid la'ani is afila uni is omnish malakid zan payah. So even though he has less than 200 dinarim, he's in the category of a pauper that he could pay himself. His own payah loy salakid.
It's contradicting what he said before.
Right, I hear. But it sounds like that's exactly sakasiv that.
Over there, it's not an argument.
No, in regular balabayas could be mafkir as nachas and be an ani. You want to say because even the ani, I hear you're right. Maybe the ani would be able to if he's maf. You want to know if the ani can be mafkir his own thing that he doesn't have to give away payah, or he is an ani already saying. You say I hear.
Then he doesn't own the property
I hear.
anymore.
You're asking why is the balabayas? Oh, right, exactly, right. Thank you, Tran, for hosting. Yeah, exactly. The property would not be his.